This week on the Guardian Football Show, I've assembled our crack team of experts from the Talking Points series to cast their eyes over the European club competitions, the Europa League and the Champions League, asking them who they think are going to be the serious contenders this time around. Plus, I'll be putting the question to the fellas, if they could choose one manager to deliver Champions League success, who would they pick? So who is the inner circle? Who are the runners and riders in the Champions League this season that you think are going to realistically make the Final Four?
I think it's hard to look beyond Bayern because, I mean, it's amazing how one injury, that injury to Javi Martinez, and they weren't going to buy anyone after that, just changed everything. You know, he was a player who can play midfield and defence, so they were right, we need two players now. We've got Mehdi Benatia, for me, best centre-back in Europe last year, and Xabi Alonso, who can play there as well. I mean,
they're stronger now than before Javi Martinez got injured.
Yeah, absolutely.
And beyond Bayern, who else? Who's going to give them a run for their money?
Well, I think Chelsea, if you're looking to get some money on it, are exceptional value at the moment. They're definitely a better team than they were 18 months ago. The only question is the Mourinho magic still there?
So what about the two big guns from La Liga?
The problem about Real Madrid is the balance of the team. You know, you've brought James Rodriguez in, you already had Ronaldo, Benzema and Bale up front. You played in a way last season which enabled you to win the Champions League because you found the right position for everybody on the pitch. You know, Di Maria was perfect in the position, the front three were perfect, and now you have to start from scratch all over. And I don't think Carlo Ancelotti will find the right way. He will have to bench some important players. If Ancelotti gets it right, then I think they can win it again.
What about Barca?
I just think that it's a new cycle, and I think it will take a long time for them to get back to their best into the new cycle, you know, and to get the team going. But I just don't think they will win it this year. I think it will take a couple of years or 3 years.
I'd agree with that, and I'm more concerned about their balance than Real Madrid's. I think, of course, we're going to find out with Suarez a little bit later in the year. But politically, they're in a situation where they can't drop one of those three: Neymar, Messi and Suarez. And they're all players who, you look at the amount they dribble the ball, they all like to own the game, they all like to run the game. And so I thought Neymar was actually pretty good in his first season at Barcelona. He took a lot of criticism, but in fact he had to step away from being the centrepiece to being a subordinate. And he learned that really well. And then when Messi got injured, he had to drop into being the centrepiece again. So I think the signing of Suarez, it seems ridiculous to say having such a great player is a disadvantage. I think it's a real problem of balance for them. I don't really like what they've done with the defence. I think they've brought in too many left footers, and I think they're players who are good but not top class, certainly in the case of Ronaldo and to a lesser extent Mathieu. I'd slightly disagree in terms of Real Madrid's balance, in that I do think it's a problem at the moment. But then again, they were horrendously open at the beginning of last season, and Ancelotti found a way. Of course, it would have been better if they hadn't bought James and they just held on to Di Maria, but of course that's not the way it works politically there. I think he can find a way. Okay,
here's a question for you. You suddenly come across a lot of money, which, let's face it, isn't going to happen working in this particular gig, and you can take over a team in Europe. You want to pick a manager out of any current managers to get you the Champions League within 3 years. Who do you go for?
Carlo Ancelotti. I mean, it's his competition. That's where he's made his name. You know, I mean, in terms of league championships, he won one at Milan, one at PSG. He's yet to do it at Real Madrid, but yeah, he's got, like Bob Paisley, 3 Champions Leagues.
What about you?
I go Mourinho.
Mourinho.
Yeah,
why Mourinho?
Mourinho? Because I think I understand Carlo is his competition, but it's also Mourinho's competition. I don't think Chelsea were ready last season. I don't think he was ready yet. But I think he's an incredible manager, and you put him for any of those big clubs we talked about, and he would win it with them.
What I think is interesting, and I'm not saying Zenit St Petersburg are going to do anything incredible next season.
But he is
I want to have a little word for Andre Villas-Boas. I would love to see him in the Champions League to some sort of extent. Of course, what he'd have done if he had any common sense is not taken the Chelsea job, stayed at Porto in 2011, and with a really good team that he had a little go at the Champions League, because in that 2010-11 season when he had Porto, there was such an incredible counter-attacking force, and the way to win things has become more and more counter-attacking.
Can you see a team from outside La Liga, the Bundesliga or the Premier League winning the Champions League in 5 years?
PSG.
Yeah, I think they're the only one probably being able to break into that. I think if the Qatari owner had arrived 10 years ago, they would have won the Champions League already by now. And I'm not saying that because it's my team and because I'm from there, but really objectively, I think that 10 years ago they would have done like Chelsea did or City did, and they would have won by now. Now it'll be more difficult, it will take a bit more time for them, but I think that eventually they will have the potential to win it at some point. They will build a team for it.
Is the Europa League devalued by teams that fail in the Champions League getting filtered into that year's tournament?
To some extent, but I think it makes it more interesting, particularly in I mean, it makes the group stage feel like a bit of a waste of time. More often than not, you do get big clubs making those sort of knockout stages that a little bit more interesting. It doesn't necessarily that they win it either. It sort of sometimes brings the best out of the outsiders.
So I find it ridiculous how a lot of teams who don't have a lot of silverware in Europe think they can turn their nose up at it. It's a great trophy. Also weighs exactly the same as the Champions League trophy, 15 kilos.
Most important element of it. Give us some dark horses for this year's tournament.
Well, like James was saying, I think it's really, really difficult to decide before the teams come out of the Champions League, which I also think is a positive thing. You have to look at Sevilla because they've got a great history in it. They've signed very well off the back of their sales of Rakitic last summer. They've got Eva Banega now amongst some rather less maverick players. Fiorentina as well, they're always terrific to watch. They've got Mario Gomez in it, unfortunately not Giuseppe Rossi, really makes a difference too.
So Chelsea, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, Real Madrid, no massive surprises there, but will there be a joker in the pack this time around? Who is going to be this year's Atletico Madrid? Maybe it'll be Atletico Madrid. And where do you stand on the Dream Champions League manager? Your team AVB, like Andy Brassell was? Let us know in the comments below, people. You know the drill by now. Don't forget, you can catch up with the guys throughout the week with their fantastic Talking Points series. And the only way to guarantee that you'll see that is to subscribe to the channel, people. We'll see you soon.